Hello, and welcome to another edition of Coffee Talk with attorney Brian D. Lerner. In this particular episode, I'd like to talk about undue influence. Everybody has heard about these stories where, some 90-year-old man, just happens to fall in love with a 90-year-old woman, and all of a sudden, the woman gets everything in the estate, the house, the money, the bank accounts, everything, and the rest of the family is cut out of everything, and everybody except for the woman thinks that that's unfair. And I'm just using this as an example. It happens the other way, and usually it's not that that blatant or that obvious, but what happens when somebody dies and there is property that essentially is cut out from somebody or goes to someone who doesn't seem to be right. They could have entered into and executed the will through undue influence, or they could have executed the living trust with undue influence as well. So I want to discuss a little bit about what is undue influence. What do you have to look for? It is something that if you decide to do, you will have to make motions in probate court. But if we're talking about a house worth $500,000 and it went to someone through undue influence when it should have gone to somebody else, then you just have to go to court and fight it. And if it takes some time to do that, if it takes some money to do that, well, then that's what has to be done, because obviously it's unfair if somebody was through manipulation and other means bequeathed or so forth to somebody, and it just doesn't seem natural. Number one, it's unfair, and number two, you, just like with anything else, you have to fight for what's right. On the other side of it, if it was right, if it is what wanted, needed to be done, then again, you go and you respond to motions claiming undue influence, and you show that there wasn't any undue influence. So it can work on both sides of the aisle here. But let's talk a little bit about what undue influence is first of all. Um, Now, basically, the undue influence exists if basically you look at the facts. Well, first of all, undue influence is when somebody essentially signs some kind of estate document to bequeath something to somebody, and it's done not through their own will, not through their own means, but it's done through manipulation or some other means which just isn't right. Okay, and they wouldn't have done it or bequeathed that property on in any other matter. So you have to look at different sets of facts as to the undue influence. So basically, there's one set of facts you need to look at. Now, a presumption of undue influence exists if the following conditions are met. Now, what that means is that if these conditions are met, then the presumption exists, and yes, undue influence exists. But then again, that can be rebutted. That's why it says a presumption, and that it is presumed to exist. But of course, you can show facts why it doesn't and why it needs to be fought. Okay. Now, one set of arguments which you could show undue influence explains that number one, there has to be a confidential relationship that existed between the chief beneficiary and the testator. So, what does that mean? Well, obviously, if some clerk in some store who doesn't even know the person who signed the will claims undue influence, well, that's not going to work. So there has to be some kind of relationship between the person making the will and the person receiving the property. Okay, so that is the confidential relationship. Now, next, look at the provisions of the will, and are those provisions inconsistent with the testator's intentions expressed before or after the will's execution. Okay, so sometimes I just give blatant examples to make the point. So let's say that Joe, on day one said, I am going to bequeath my house to my daughter Mary. Okay, and then 3 days later, he meets somebody, they fall madly in love, and then all of a sudden, a new will comes out that says, I am going to bequeath my house to my new lover, Lily Beth. Okay. Um, Number one, you have Lily Beth and Joe that had a relationship, so it's a confidential relationship. You had Lily Beth, which is now the new beneficiary to receive everything. And the intent of the testator completely changed from before his relationship with her until when he made the will. Okay, now let's look at the next item. You want to look and see if the testator's mental or physical condition permitted a subversion of his or her free will. Okay, um, that's not real easy to prove, but look and see if they are old and have dementia or Alzheimer's, or if they're completely alone and somebody is threatening them. I mean, there's actually been cases where, for example, long time ago, if, for example, this person did not help this other person escape from a camp, it was a Nazi camp actually, um, and agree that he was going to give his entire estate and cut out all the heirs unless he helped, that of course would be undue influence. Okay, there's tons of different examples, and I'm sure some of you listening could think of your own. But you have to also look at the final element of undue influence here, the one where we're talking about the presumption, where the chief beneficiary, the one who's going to receive everything, was active in procuring the testator's new will or new signing of, changing who goes, what goes to whom. Okay, so those are the conditions that you need to look at for a presumption of undue influence: confidential relationship, the mental state of the testator is impaired in some manner, the chief beneficiary procured it in some manner, and the intent and of the testator changed from before to after the new device was made. Okay, so you have to look at those, and then there's other ways of showing it too. And I'm just giving you sort of an overview. But when, for example, I have to go to court and argue undue influence, depending on the facts, I either argue the presumption under the elements I just told you, or there's another way, which is similar but not exactly, where you look at the beneficiary's active participation in procuring the will, and then there's a confidential relationship, and the undue benefit to the beneficiary under the will. Okay, so you can look at it in that manner as well. So either way, I think you're getting an idea of the fact that undue influence is a very fact-specific area of law. So there will be declarations, there'll be testimony, there'll be evidence that's brought in to show what exists or doesn't exist to show the undue influence. Because, for example, just because it goes to someone who doesn't seem like it should go to doesn't mean there was undue influence. It might be an indication of it, but it's not just a matter of going into court and saying, well, he shouldn't have given it to her, or she shouldn't have given it to him because of this and that. Okay, and so what you can do is look at the specific facts. What's interesting is I saw there was just an episode on Grey's Anatomy, sort of with this same issue here, where the mother, who was the chief surgeon, she was like 75 years old, and she was going with a about 35-year-old man. And so the chief surgeon, who was the son, um, said to her, no, 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 this is not natural. He just wants your property and wants this and that. And of course, at the end of the show, it turns out that the 35-year-old man really did love the mother, who was 70 some. Um, but it did give an initial indication that there could very well be undue influence. So it's just this type of stuff that you need to look for. So you need to have some evidence that the beneficiary, and again, the beneficiary is the person who receiving the property, somehow influenced the dispositive provisions of the will, okay, and somehow made it so that they were going to get the property where they wouldn't have done it before, okay. So given that, this is the basic go around of undue influence, and you know, you have to look at the facts. When you come into my office, I'll be able to in depth and determine if there is a case for undue influence, or if there is a case to fight against undue influence. Either way, and see what I can do to help. So if you like the video, click like. You can subscribe. Also, give my office a call. We get free consultations on the initial one, Long Beach or Los Angeles, and then we'll go from there. Okay, more in the coming videos.